I want to start by saying something that might sting a little bit. If you're struggling with your kids' classes, it doesn't mean that you're a bad coach. It also doesn't mean that kids are the problem, but it might mean you're bad at coaching kids. That's not an insult, it's a category error, because coaching adults and coaching kids are two completely different skills. I see this all the time in Jiu Jitsu. Amazing adult coaches, high-level competitors, really deep technical knowledge, and then they step onto the kids' mats and everything feels harder, more chaotic, more frustrating, and a lot less rewarding. So today I want to talk about why that happens, why being good at coaching adults doesn't automatically transfer to kids, and why most of the problems people blame on behavior, attention, or discipline are actually coaching problems. The uncomfortable truth. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Kids' classes don't fall apart because kids are difficult. They fall apart because the coaching approach doesn't match how kids learn. Most coaches don't realize this because their identity is tied to being a good coach. So when something doesn't work with kids, they don't question the approach. They question the kids. They say things like, these kids don't listen. Kids these days can't focus. They're lazy. They just want to muck around. But if the same issue keeps happening across different kids, different classes, and different days, that's not a kid problem. That is a coaching problem. Why adult coaching doesn't transfer. Adult learners come to class with things kids don't have. They have context, patience, motivation, and the ability to override confusion because they want the outcome. But kids don't. Kids learn through exploration, clarity, emotional safety, and immediate feedback from the environment. When coaches teach kids the same way they teach adults, just simplified, they miss this opportunity. They explain too much, they correct too quickly, they expect compliance instead of understanding. And then they're shocked when kids disengage. But kids aren't resisting learning, they're resisting confusion. I know what I want to teach. This is where ego quietly creeps in. Most coaches walk into class with a plan, a technique, a sequence, a curriculum in their head, and planning isn't bad. Planning is important. But the moment the plan becomes more important than the kids that are in front of you, ego takes over. Because instead of asking, what do these kids need right now? You are asking, how do I get them to do what I planned? So when it doesn't land, you don't adapt. You explain it again. You slow it down, you repeat yourself, and you get frustrated that they're not listening or doing it correctly. And eventually you think, these kids are really hard work. But what's actually happening is that the environment hasn't adapted. Quick pause for a second. If you coach kids, I'm curious, what's the hardest part of your kids' classes right now? Behavior, attention, parents, structure, or something else? Drop it in the comments. I do read everyone and it helps shape what I make next. Behavior is not the root problem. Talk about behavior for a second, because behavior is where most coaches get stuck. They try to fix behavior with rules and consequences, warnings, timeouts, removal from class. But behavior is rarely the root issue. Behavior is information, and it tells you that either the task is too hard, the task is too vague, or the task has ended. The kids feel unsafe or lost, the room is overstimulating, or expectations are unclear. Kids don't act out because they want to make your life difficult. They act out because the environment is asking more than they can actually give you. If you don't know how to read that, kids' classes are always going to feel exhausting. This is the gap most coaches fall into. They're not bad coaches, but they're bad at kids. They haven't learned how attention actually works, how working memory limits behavior, how emotional regulation shows up physically, how safety affects learning, how play and structure coexist. And because they haven't learned those things, they rely on control, volume, authority, repetition, discipline, which does work short term. But long term, kids disengage, parents feel it, your retention drops, and coaching becomes way more stressful instead of rewarding. What good kids coaching actually requires. Good kids coaching requires a different mindset. It requires humility over control, curiosity over certainty, responsiveness over rigid planning, and it means being willing to change the task mid-class, to just throw out the plan, to simplify, to reframe, to meet kids where they actually are. It means understanding that. If kids aren't getting it, the answer isn't, we'll just try harder. The answer is, what am I missing? And that question alone separates adult-focused coaches from kids coaches who thrive. If this is resonating, this is exactly what I break down inside my coaching community. We go deep into kids how to actually learn, how to structure classes, manage behavior through the environment, and build programs that parents trust. There's a free level if you just want to start learning, and there's a premium option if you want access to all of the courses and frameworks. I'm going to leave the link below. So if your kids' class feels harder than it should, if behavior feels like a constant battle, if you leave class frustrated way more than fulfilled, doesn't mean you're a bad coach, but it might mean that you haven't learned how to coach kids yet. And that's okay, because coaching kids is a skill. It's a separate one that can be learned, but only if you're willing to let go of ego. Question your approach and stop blaming the kids for something that lives in the environment. Because the moment you get better at kids, coaching becomes calmer, classes become smoother, and everything starts to make a lot more sense. If this video made sense to you, watch the next one here, where I break down why most jiu-jitsu classes aren't working in the first place and how structure, not effort, is usually the missing piece.